Welcome to Tuesday's Topics. Today I have JP Nerbun, one of my favorite guests of all time, and we're talking about his book, Calling Up, that is now available online all over the world, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's in stores as well. Welcome, JP, and congrats on this.
Thanks, Asia. It's good to be back again.
Well, today we're going to talk all about Calling Up, and it's one of my favorite books. It has helped me so much as a parent. It was written for coaches, but it's helped me a lot for parenting. And before we get started as to why you wrote the book, I just want to say, anybody, please, if you have questions, comments, let us know you're there. Ask the question. JP is great. We'll answer everything as we go, and I'll try to check and see as we do it. But please write in any questions or comments. All right, JP, Calling Up. Now, why did you decide to write this book?
So a few years back, about 5 years ago, I kind of hit like this low point in my coaching journey where I was like, I was all about coaching for about 10 years, and I was considering leaving it just because the relationships with my players had kind of hit a low. I didn't feel like I was able to have a team of high standards because a lot of the external pressures that I think coaches face, whether it be just the sense of entitlement around athletes today, parents, and just those challenges. But also just kind of the internal pressures of just trying to be a winning coach and have a winning program. And so all that was taking its toll on me. And as a result, I was thinking about leaving. And so in that moment, I kind of started to share my experience through writing blogs with other coaches out there. And I realized I wasn't the only person that was kind of going through those challenges. And so I kind of spent a good few years just going all in on this idea around coaching and transformational leadership, so that I could go back to like my core purpose of why I got into coaching in the first place, which was to have an impact on people's lives, to help change people's lives.
So give us a definition, what is transformational coaching?
Well, I think let's look at transactional coaching. And here, the bottom line here first is there's transactional, there's transformational coaching. In today's world, we live in a very transactional world, especially in our sporting environment, right? People are putting more and more money and time and investment into sports, and what parents and players and athletes expect is they expect something in return, whether it be scholarships or playing time or points. But we are all looking for what are we going to get out of this experience. Mm-hmm. And as a coach, you can be in that same mentality too. When you're trying to validate yourself with wins, when there's that pressure there, trying to hold on to your job, it can become a very transactional relationship with you and the athletes and you, the other parents. And so as a transformational coach, you're kind of going back to your core purpose for why so many of us get into it, which is we're looking there to serve the needs of the athletes, to meet their needs, to help them to grow as people. And that's what our core purpose is as a transformational coach.
And you meet with tons of coaches. That's what you do. You consult and help coaches all the time. And I'm sure this is one thing you must hear a lot, which is, okay, that's great. I want to do that. But if I don't get the wins, I'm not even going to be around to be able to affect the lives of kids. So how do you reconcile that, or how do you answer that?
Well, I think this comes back to when it comes to transformational coaching, we're not talking about just this idea of just this lovey-dovey culture where everyone's just high-fiving, having fun, playing games. It actually, a transformational culture is built on really, really strong relationships, and it's built on really, really high standards. And so you actually, when it comes to the wins, which are important, obviously, and winning the scoreboard does matter, but it's just not the most important thing. Winning is our objective, is what we like to say. It's our objective. It's what we're trying to do. Every time we hit the court or hit the field, we want to win games, but it's not why we show up. And so we got to stay true to our purpose while still pursuing that objective. And that's not always that easy, but I will come back to this idea that the more you focus on this transformational mission, the better your team will actually do, right? Because it's high standards and great relationships, which we know makes for a great experience, highly motivated athletes, strong leaders, right? All the things that we want in our team, those things will actually still take place, but even in a better way.
And as I've said to you often too, I read this book. I don't coach that much. I coach occasionally and tried to live by this. I actually had read a lot of it before I coached last season and implemented a lot of it into that. But as a parent, so many of these concepts work and translate into parenting as well, and how you deal with and handle your kids, and in trying to get them to do things, instead of calling up or calling out, you call them up. So what exactly does that mean? Can you explain that phrase to us?
Yeah, when I like first real quick that I like how you talked about how it's impacted you as a parent, because I mean, it's one of the most special things in my work is when I work with coaches through our mentorship program and consulting, we start to realize that it doesn't just impact their team, but it impacts the rest of their life. It impacts the relationship with their spouse, and impacts the relationship with their children, right? So these principles really transcend, sports. They really come across other areas of our life. Now, the difference between calling someone up and calling someone out, and that was something that I kind of hung on to a couple of years back, is that just when we think about what it means when we hear that word calling someone up, and it really means that we're not up here talking down at people, but that we're walking through the struggle with them. And that's what people need, is they don't need people telling them what to do. They need people just walking with them, because here's the reality: when it comes to our athletes, with anybody that we're leading, people want to be good athletes. They want to be a good athlete. They want to be a good teammate. They want to be a good person. Like, we all have these aspirations in our life. We don't need people to tell us we already know the things that we should be doing. Right? We look at our own lives, like we already know the things that we should be doing more of in our lives and doing less of in our lives. We don't need people to tell us more about that. We need people that will walk with us, support us, help us to overcome our obstacles. And really, it requires, at kind of the core of it, a lot of vulnerability when we're calling someone up, that we're also not appearing to be perfect all the time. Mm-hmm. And as a coach, this is one of the most important things: is it's okay to say I screwed up. It's okay to say I don't have all the answers. And that's one of the first steps in doing that.
And also in the book, for those of you who have not read it, it was interesting too, because not too many, like, I don't want to say self-help, but it's kind of, would you classify it as a self-help book? Kind of, you're helping people, but it's fictional. So you have this character, Daniel, and he's a struggling coach, and you follow his path along. And I can remember reading some of the things about, calling up. Yeah, that sounds great. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, I got to ask JP. I mean, but how do you really do that? I mean, all the stuff we're saying, it sounds so like out there. So if you're listening to this book actually goes on to tell you step by step how you can actually change and do that. And that's what's so great. It's not just saying, yeah, call people up, not out. It literally takes it one step at a time, and you watch this character, Daniel's journey of how he does it, and he's not perfect, and he messes up again and again and again, but it really does walk you through the steps to get there.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important. Is I love reading. I read a lot of books, and some of the books I do read are fables, but I always get frustrated because fables leave me feeling good at the end, but they don't really often leave me equipped. And I think what coaches do need, or even just any leader out there needs, is they kind of need a little bit of a blueprint, kind of steps to take moving forward. And so what I've tried to do is give coaches or even leaders a blueprint for moving forward of what that culture can look like, what type of leader they can be, and helping them to kind of identify that. And then some systems in place that can actually build their team's culture. It's not just some once-off good feel team meeting, but systems that, repeatable things that we're going to be doing consistently day in and day out that are going to continue to nurture the relationships and raise the standards in our program.
So before we go into it, because I want to break it down a little bit for everyone, so if they don't actually get to read the book, where people can walk away from this having some knowledge. The more people that hear it and understand it, the more kids it can help. So I really want people to get something out today. But let's talk about, give us an example, a concrete example of what calling up versus calling out would look like.
Let's just start with probably one of my most important systems, I think, that I really discussed in there, which is the transformational discipline. And when we discipline transactionally, we're looking for one thing. And this applies to us as parents, this applies to us as leaders. Compliance, obedience. That's the one thing we're looking for, because we want to, our kid. I want to get my daughter to sleep. What is the most effective way of doing things? This is where we go wrong in leadership, is we think effective is always beneficial, right? And transactional discipline is often very effective. So if I'm a coach, when my players aren't working hard, I'm going to make them run. it's effective at getting them to work hard in the moment, but it's not beneficial. It's not transformational discipline. What that is going to do is it's going to not just get compliance and obedience, it's going to build character and emotional intelligence, and it's going to nurture the relationship. So when we put them on the line and run them, now we're going to do something really, really important, which really kind of is rooted in brain science and our ability to connect with them in that moment. The player that is not working hard in practice, let's take them for instance, which is probably the most common thing. So that player that's not working hard in practice, typically what do? Get on the line, run until you want to work hard, right? Well, now I'm going to come in there and say, first off, connect with them by trying to help them identify and self-evaluate what is going on. And so often, if we just ask a player, hey, rate your effort on a scale of 1 to 10, or you don't seem to be operating, or you don't seem to be working as hard as you usually do, is something up? And we just connect with them and use a question to start to help them to self-evaluate or become self-aware. I mean, how often do we just go through life not aware of what our current state is in that moment? So we help them to evaluate, and now from there, they'll typically be fairly honest, right? And if they're not honest, or if they're not fully aware, then we need to really drill down with them more specifics. Well, if you think your effort is 10 out of 10, tell me what a 10 out of 10 looks like, and get specific on the behaviors. I'm sprinting, I'm communicating, all those things. And so you get them to identify those specific behaviors. And then you start to bring more of that awareness. Now, the second half of that is, after they've had this awareness, is that you want to empower them to self-correct. And so, okay, you're at a 3 out of 10, or you're really at an unacceptable level when it comes to your effort right now. Well, what's 1 or 2 things you can do right now to pick that up? To move the needle up there a little bit, and you help them to identify questions like, how can I help you? All right. Or is there anything else you need on that? Just little things like that. Do you need more encouragement? Do you need me to get on your case right now? Those type of conversations sometimes happen outside of that moment, right? And it's really understanding and having that relationship that makes that conversation go really well. But just simple of just connecting with them and then redirecting with them, and just using some other questions to help them figure out what are the steps they need to take are really important. Now, if they don't pick it up, if their effort doesn't get better, then I'm sure coaches are like, well, then what do I do? You enforce boundaries with love. That's the biggest thing here. And there's a very big difference. And this is where we get entitlement so much in our athletes today, is we're constantly telling them, not always consciously, but subconsciously, we're kind of telling them, like, we need you. Like, we can't ask you to leave practice. You're our best player, right? Like, how often we have our best players, our laziest players, like so often coaches are talking about. Well, it's because we allow that, we tolerate that. Now, we don't have to yell or demean or break them down. All we can do is just say, hey, it is a privilege to be on this team. Right? It is an opportunity to get better every day that you're here. You've lost that opportunity. We'll see you tomorrow. Or if they're not going hard in that drill, even just smaller way, you just say, hey, just if you're not going to put your effort in that drill, if you cannot pick it up, then I'm going to ask you to step out of the drill, and you're just going to lose the opportunity to get better right now. And I think that's a really, really important piece of that discipline system.
And you wrote an article for us not too long ago where I think it was a real coach, a real parent who stuck up for a coach, because a lot of times coaches might be thinking, if you're throwing kids out of practice, if you're keeping them from practice, I mean, especially if they're the good players, you're going to have parents breathing down your neck, the administration breathing down your neck. So what's that side piece of it look like? How do you handle that?
With the parent component?
Yeah, and the administration. I mean, because you have to, it's really important everyone sort of buy in, right? To know what you're working with and how you're going to be able to implement it.
Yeah, and I think most coaches see parents as their biggest problem right now. And it's really, we've got to shift our focus from that. We actually really have to have a complete paradigm shift. Parents are potentially, if we see it the right way, our biggest asset. Because we're really, when we come back to transformational coaching, we're about serving the needs of the athlete. And when it comes to that athlete and that person, the parent is the primary caregiver, right? They've been the one that's raising them in their entire life. And so we're just coming in somewhere along that journey, and we're supposed to be helping that development of that person and that athlete there. So we need to first have a shift and just be grateful for the opportunity that we get to work with people's kids. And just having an attitude of gratitude is very, very important. Mm-hmm. Now, after that, it's really starting to open to dialogue. And you talked about sharing our purpose, our vision of what we have there. But also I talk more about, I think a lot of coaches like to say, these are the conversations I won't have with you this year to parents. And I'd like to talk about, well, these are the conversations I want to have. I want to talk about, when you see something going on at home with your child and they're not wanting to play anymore, when they're not enjoying their sport, I need to know about it. When there's something going on at home outside of that sport that might be affecting them, I need to know about it. When you don't understand why your child is not playing, I want to talk about it. You may not agree with me, but it's my job to make sure I'm communicating to everyone in the program why kids are playing and why kids are not playing, like communicating and having transparency around playing time. So it's largely about the conversations that we are willing to have. And that takes a lot of courage to step in there, because a lot of coaches like myself, we've had some pretty nasty experiences around parents sometimes coming at us, calling us out or getting upset with stuff. And so this is really, really challenging for coaches.
And when you're talking about that, it also reminds me, like, trust. And as you talk a lot about in the book, they start to trust. So like a parent may not want to tell you those things if they don't think they think you're going to punish their kid for feeling that way, or that you'll stop. So as a main point in it is, you lead by example. And that's a huge point that you keep making throughout the book. And once they trust that you're going to be true to your word, then they might have more trust in communicating honestly about what their kids are going through.
Yeah, and I mentioned this earlier in our conversation, which is the importance of vulnerability. And when we talk about parent meetings with our coaches, one of the slides that I always encourage coaches to put in there is things that I've learned from last season, which is essentially all the things I screwed up and all the things I'm trying to get better at, and just making it okay that we're not perfect here. Like, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to send a signal here through that bit of vulnerability there, that we're not going to be perfect. As parents, we're all screwing up. As coaches, we're going to screw up. As players, we're all going to screw up. But let's focus back on why we're here, like what we hope to have our kid to get out of this and what we want that experience to be like. And so there's some other conversation pieces when you do get the crazy parents calling you and they're upset about playing time and they're ticked off, of just really trying to help bring them back to what can we do to support, and really focus our attention on the needs of the athlete is so important.
And now let's get to the book, and you break it down. Like in part 1, it's the vision of a leader. So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, well, we've touched a good bit about that, which is really just this idea around transformational leadership, transformational coaching, which is I'm having a relationship that's meaningful, and I'm pushing them and raising the standards of my program, and I'm changing lives. And it comes back to, why do we coach? And Joe Ehrmann's questions are in the book, from his book, Inside Out Coaching. Why do we coach? Why do we coach the way we do? And how does it feel to be coached by me? And at the pinnacle of that is, how do I define success in coaching? So it really comes back at the core of some of those ideas of are we actually living out our mission as a coach? Because I think so often we get lost in the transactional society. And we get caught up in the wins and the scoreboard, and we forget about what our purpose is.
And then part 2 is growing as a leader. So what is that?
Well, I mean, one of the questions I always ask as coaches in workshops is, if you could change one thing about your team, if you could just change one thing about your team's program and your culture, what would it be? And coaches are often, I want leaders, or I don't want difficult parents, and the answer is yourself. Like, the only thing you can change is yourself. So it always starts with yourself. And so really what's important there is that we take ownership, first off, that we are the biggest influence on our team culture. Vulnerability, it's about empowering the athletes. And we talk a lot about using questions and systems around leadership, but really trying to put ownership on them. And there's some really powerful ways to do that. And then lastly, I'm kind of going into some strategies around how we can do a better job of connecting with athletes, especially today's athletes, because it's becoming more and more difficult in our age today to connect and actually form meaningful relationships. Because when people are challenged, when kids are challenged, often I think as coaches we feel like they're just going to leave and go to the next team or the next club, right? Like when we're trying to really raise the standards there, and so how we balance standards and relationship will go a lot into that.
And in the book, you have which character was it? Archie, or one of the kids at the end, who was one of the best players on the team, you ended up having to cut him. And I think that obviously that was a huge decision in the book and a huge pivotal turning point. And for like, when I was thinking about that, because you also don't want to give up on a kid, right? He's bringing his own baggage to it. There's who knows why he won't work hard, why he keeps, what's going on at home or whatever. But there comes a point when you do have to cut him loose. And for him, it was what? Because it was 3 seasons of trying to work with him and he wasn't, or like why was that decision made? And how does that relate?
Yeah, and that's a really challenging question of when you let a player go. But I think what's really important is that you make sure that you communicate the expectations very clearly of what it means to be a part of your program. And that if you choose to not meet those expectations, then you're choosing not to be a part of that team. And so this difference between punishment and consequences it's largely semantics, but semantics are really important. Right? People talk about boundaries and consequences versus rules and punishment. I'm very, very big into the boundaries and consequences approach, which is this is the non-negotiables of our program that I have set. These are the standards that the players have set. We talk about empowering players to set some standards within the program. And when players fail to consistently meet those, and they've had multiple chances, and you've laid out there, then they're choosing to not be a part of the team, not you. And so you really take the onus off yourself there, and you're putting it onto the player. And that was the case with that character in the story.
That's one of the quotes I picked out. I'm going to read it. It's not as rules and punishments, but as boundaries and consequences. I just love this. Punishment is about the past. This is right from the book, by the way. It's what you do to others. Consequences are about the future and something they do to themselves. So you're talking about semantics, right? But it really is so different and so important. And I just love that. Can you talk a little? I mean, that's kind of what you were just saying, but that to me is so key.
Yeah, I mean, let's just dive into the semantics things. How we communicate and what we're saying are really important. So let's go back to that old transformational discipline thing around practice. You've lost the privilege to practice today. You've lost the opportunity to get better. You're reminding them that they are making a choice. Now, also how we say that through our tone, our body language is probably 90% of it, and our attitude in that we're there walking with them. Like, come on, like, it's more like, come on, I know you can get it together. I know you can work harder than this, and so you've done all these things that are really important. As I mentioned in the book, advocacy before accountability. Like, I'm supporting you before I'm going to come in and hold you accountable. Right. And that's really, really important here. And but at the end of the day, you still need accountability, but you're framing it in a way that it's their choice.
And that reminded me when we did a podcast with you and you told us the story, how the body language and all that was so important. You used to set up a camera to watch yourself coach so that you could critique how you were conveying things with your body language, and really studied that and like improved on a lot of things from watching those.
Well, and in all honesty, like, I couldn't even get very far initially in the video because I was so appalled at my own coaching behavior. I was such a wild guy for sure. So, I mean, this is the type of intentionality that we bring though to the coaches I work with is we do film, we mic them up, and we break down the little things that we say because they do make a really, really, really big difference. I mean, I always talk about like the growth mindset research, and I mentioned in the book there, just the difference in telling kids, you're really, really smart, and you must have worked really, really hard at that, like that Carol Dweck does around that. Like, just the change in language of praising them for their ability and praising them for their effort it's huge. Like, it's like a complete 80% shift in their willingness to go take a harder test or an easier test.
I know.
Semantics matter in a big way.
I know. Parents, we need to share this, or you need to share your message with parents of little kids. Like, if I could go over and redo some of those things or have that knowledge when my kids were just little. I mean, of course you can start at any time, but that stuff is gold. Her studies and all that is just fascinating. All right, now the chapters are the 3 and 4 is building a culture that changes lives. So back to the book, and what does that entail?
Yeah, and so really the feel of the book changes throughout. And I feel like probably part one is probably you feel like in some ways you might be reading a bit more personal development type book.
Right.
But if you get into part two and you really go into three and four is really kind of that systems based approach. And so for the parents, maybe this will be, or people that are not coaches, is probably maybe not the most engaging part for them, but they still will find some value in it. For coaches, this is the super, super practical part of things that we can do with our team that are really going to build leaders, right? And really, there's a really important principle behind that, which is, leaders aren't born, right? They're developed, right? Leaders create more leaders. It's going to how we can create a positive experience, right, where people are enjoying when they're showing up every day, and then really also lastly about how we build emotional intelligence within our athletes. And I really dive deep into the strategies around that.
Well, I hope everyone will pick up the book. I did want to have one more little thing that I pulled out of it that I just love. Instead of winning, dominating, and controlling, try respecting, empowering, and loving. And those are different ways a coach could interact, most of them with the first one. But that's like a real sort of encapsulates what the book to me was about. And changing that style is huge. And as a parent too, I mean, so much of it is exactly that: winning, dominating, controlling. We think we're holding them accountable and getting good results from those things, and they just don't work for long term at all.
Yeah, and it's a really challenging. I mean, I think I go through it as a parent like every night when it comes to, putting my daughter to sleep, whether it's just getting her to sleep so I can go do what I want to do, or I can actually connect with her and help her to self-regulate her emotions and when she's tired and stuff like that. And it really comes down to what I call in the book a heart posture shift. I mean, that's really at it. Like, we can talk about all these strategies, Asia, about the ways we should be doing things differently. But if I don't start to view other people, in my life and the people that I'm leading, if I don't start to view them differently, as my job is there to serve them, then I'm always going to struggle. There's a phrase in sports like great coaches can get more out of their players or get a lot out of their players. And I really feel like that is often the wrong type of heart posture towards it. It's really about what we can give to them. There's a great comedian, Michael Jr. out there. He talks about that. It's about giving, he talks about getting versus giving laughs. And I've always been really, really big on that phrasing. It's like, well, what type of experience can I give my players? And forget about getting more out of them and
Right.
putting all the talent we can so we can validate ourselves with wins. But let's go out there and let's focus on giving them an experience that they remember, they enjoy, and it changes their life.
I love it. All right. And everyone, it's available digital. Is there anything, how can they get it? Just go to Amazon and search it up?
Yeah, just go on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, and you can order if you like paperback. I think that it's shipping. It's got the 2-day Prime shipping, and then it's also available electronically. If you want bulk orders or you want to learn more about my stuff, you can go to thriveonchallenge.com. I've got some bulk order deals there and loads of articles and other content for coaches and leaders out there.
And as I said, parents too. And I really hope people do, because what's so exciting to me, if one coach reads this book, and hopefully they'll read it a lot of times, because as I'm going to do as well, think how many lives he can touch with the kids that he coaches. Like, it's incredible. It really can change people and change lives. And I thank you so much, JP, for writing it and for being on today.
Yeah, just one thing on that. I think I've actually had some parents and friends of mine. Would it be offensive to my coach if I got him this book? Like, am I telling him he's a bad coach?
I know.
No, like just thank you for all the great work you've done this season. It would be a great gift, I think, for any coach out there. I don't think they'd take offense to it. If they do, then they've got some other issues.
There you go. Or just leave it on their in their front office. Anonymously. All right, JP, thank you. We'll talk to you again very soon, I'm sure.
Thanks for having me on.